Think about the last time you laughed at something that wasn't even funny. A friend stumbled, someone said your name wrong. Nothing clever happened. No punchline, no joke. And yet the sound came out of you anyway. Fast, involuntary, almost embarrassing. You couldn't have stopped it if you tried. But the real answer for why that happens is far stranger than it was funny. Laughter, it turns out, has almost nothing to do with humor at all. That single sentence undoes almost everything you've assumed about why you laugh. You've spent your whole life treating laughter as a reaction to comedy. A punchline lands and a laugh follows, like a domino falling into place. But scientists who have spent decades studying laughter in the wild, in offices, in bars, on city sidewalks, found something almost nobody expects. Most laughter has nothing to do with jokes. It isn't a response to comedy. It's a response to each other. So where does it actually come from? Not from language, not from culture, not even from something uniquely human. The roots go back millions of years, buried in the branches of a family tree you share with animals that have never told a joke in their lives. Start with the body itself, because laughter is stranger, mechanically, than almost anything else you do. It isn't controlled by the part of your brain that handles speech. When you talk, you're using your cerebral cortex, the outer layer of your brain responsible for conscious thought and deliberate action. Laughter bypasses that system almost entirely. It's driven instead by older, deeper structures, the brainstem and a region called the periaqueductal gray, a small area buried near the center of your brain that also controls things like breathing and pain response. In plain terms, laughter lives closer to your reflexes than to your reasoning. That's why you can laugh at something you know isn't funny. That's why nervous laughter escapes you at funerals. Your cortex isn't in charge of the decision. Something much older is pulling the lever. And if laughter is older than thought itself, where do you actually look for its origin? You look at play. Specifically, you look at rough and tumble play among young mammals, the kind of wrestling, chasing, and mock fighting you've probably seen puppies do in a backyard. Researchers studying chimpanzees and other great apes noticed something remarkable decades ago. When apes tickle each other or engage in rough physical play, they produce a rhythmic, breathy, panting sound. It isn't identical to human laughter, but acoustically it's close enough that scientists consider it a direct evolutionary ancestor. Gorillas do it. Orangutans do it. Even rats, when tickled by researchers, emit high-pitched vocalizations too high for human ears to hear without special equipment, sounds that correlate directly with what looks like enjoyment. That detail alone should stop you. Rats laugh. Not metaphorically. Measurably. A neuroscientist named Ayak Panksepp spent years tickling laboratory rats and recording their ultrasonic chirps, and found that rats would seek out the hand that tickled them, the same way a child chases a parent for another round of tickling. He even found that rats raised in playful environments chirped more readily than rats raised in isolation, as if the capacity for laughter itself could be strengthened or starved depending on how much safety and social contact an animal grew up with. If laughter existed in a common ancestor shared by rats and primates, that pushes its origin back tens of millions of years, long before anything resembling a human stood upright. Laughter isn't a byproduct of intelligence. It's older than intelligence. It's older than most of what makes you human at all. Consider what that timeline actually means. Language, by most estimates, is somewhere between 50,000 and a few 100,000 years old. Laughter, by contrast, may stretch back tens of millions of years, sitting in the family tree long before anything that could be called a word ever existed. That gap should reshape how you think about comedy entirely. You didn't learn to laugh because you learned to joke. You learned to joke because you already knew how to laugh, and jokes were simply a new outlet built on top of ancient wiring that had nothing to do with cleverness in the first place. So if laughter didn't start as a response to humor, what was it actually for? The leading explanation is safety. Rough play among young animals looks on the surface exactly like real fighting. Teeth are bared, bodies collide. To an outside observer, a wrestling match and a real fight can look almost identical in the first half second. Laughter, in its earliest form, may have functioned as a signal, a way of saying, without language, "This is play, not danger. Keep going. I'm not actually trying to hurt you. That single acoustic signal let two young animals wrestle at full intensity without the interaction spiraling into real violence. It was a safety valve built directly into physical contact, millions of years before anyone needed it for a sitcom. Now stretch that forward into early human ancestors, standing in small, vulnerable groups on the savanna, surrounded by predators and scarce resources. Trust wasn't a luxury. It was survival. And laughter, inherited from that ancient play signal, became something far more powerful than a reaction to a joke. It became a bonding tool. A researcher named Robert Provine spent years studying laughter not in comedy clubs, but on ordinary streets, recording thousands of real conversations between strangers and friends. His findings were almost the opposite of what you'd expect. More than 80% of the laughter he recorded followed completely unfunny statements. Things like, "I'll see you guys later," or "It was nice meeting you." Nothing clever. Nothing designed to amuse. People weren't laughing at jokes. They were laughing at connection itself. Why would connection alone be worth a physical, audible signal? Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose daily lives resemble early human life more closely than anything in a city ever could, have documented something telling. Among groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, laughter appears constantly around shared food, shared fires, and shared storytelling, often completely detached from anything resembling a joke. It shows up as a kind of social punctuation, marking the end of a task, easing an awkward silence, closing the distance after a disagreement. Because for early humans, laughter did something words alone couldn't do quickly enough. It synchronized a group in real time. When one person laughs, and others join in, something measurable happens in the brain. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins, your body's natural pain-relieving chemicals, the same class of chemical involved in what's sometimes called a runner's high. Shared laughter, in other words, isn't just pleasant. It's a chemical event that binds a group together, lowers collective stress, and signals at a biological level that everyone in this circle is safe with everyone else. A tribe that could laugh together, that could release tension together after a hunt or a conflict, held together tighter than a tribe that couldn't. Laughter became glue, not decoration, structure. And here's where the story gets stranger, because laughter isn't just social, it's almost violently contagious, in a way few other human behaviors are. You've felt this yourself. Someone starts laughing near you for a reason you don't even know, and you feel your own mouth twitching before you've processed anything. Scientists call this the contagion effect, and it's driven by mirror neurons, brain cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you simply observe someone else performing it. When you see someone laugh, a part of your brain reacts as though you're laughing yourself, priming your own laughter response before your conscious mind has caught up. This is why laugh tracks work on sitcoms, even ones you know are recorded artificially. This is why yawning spreads through a room and laughter spreads even faster. Your brain isn't asking whether something is funny, it's asking whether the people around you feel safe enough to laugh, and matching them. But if laughter is really about bonding and safety, why does it sometimes show up in the exact opposite context? Why do people laugh at funerals? Why do soldiers laugh in combat? Why does a nervous interview candidate let out a strange giggle after a serious question? This is the twist that most people never expect. Laughter isn't only a response to safety, it's also a response to the release of tension, regardless of whether that tension was ever fun to begin with. Your brainstem doesn't distinguish neatly between "this is a joyful moment" and "this is an overwhelming moment that needs to be discharged somehow." Laughter, in cases like these, functions almost like a pressure valve on a machine. When emotional intensity builds past a certain threshold, whether it's grief, fear, or extreme stress, the body sometimes releases it through laughter, because the underlying circuitry is older than your ability to consciously separate those feelings. It isn't a malfunction. It's the same ancient safety signal reflex, misfiring, or rather, firing exactly as it always has, just outside the context you expected. There's an even more extreme version of this. A rare neurological condition called pseudobulbar affect causes people to laugh uncontrollably in situations with no emotional trigger at all, sometimes following a stroke or traumatic brain injury. Patients report laughing at moments that feel completely disconnected from anything they find funny, sometimes even distressing to them personally. It's proof, in the most unsettling way possible, that laughter really is running on its own separate circuitry. It doesn't need your permission. It doesn't even need your amusement. It's a physical reflex your ancestors built for survival, still running in your body today, occasionally firing without the software of humor attached to it at all. So where does all of this leave you now, sitting somewhere reading this, thinking about the last time you laughed? Every time you laugh at a group chat message, you're activating a signal that predates language itself. Every laugh track on a show you're half watching is exploiting a contagion effect built for a savanna you've never seen. Every awkward laugh you've let out in a tense meeting or a hospital waiting room is your brainstem reaching for a 50-million-year-old tool because it doesn't have anything newer installed. You think you're laughing because something is funny. Most of the time, you're actually laughing because you're human, and being human means constantly signaling to the people around you that you're safe, that you belong, that whatever just happened, the two of you are still on the same side. Look at how differently people laugh depending on who's in the room. You've probably noticed this without naming it. You laugh louder around close friends than around strangers, not because your friends are funnier, but because laughter, at its root, has always been a measurement of trust. Provine's research found that people are up to 30 times more likely to laugh in the presence of others than when they're alone, even when consuming the exact same funny material. Comedy, in other words, was never really the point. The presence of another person was. Think about memes for a second, because they reveal the same ancient mechanism wearing modern clothing. A meme rarely makes you laugh out loud in isolation. What makes you send it is the imagined reaction of the person receiving it, the shared moment of connection it creates between two people who might be miles apart. You're not laughing at pixels on a screen. You're using an ancient bonding signal, the exact one that once kept early human groups cohesive around a fire, except now it travels through fiber optic cables instead of open air. And this is where the whole story quietly folds back on itself. Laughter never stopped being what it always was. It only changed its costume. It went from a wrestling match between two young primates, to a survival signal on an open plain, to a chemical bonding tool around a fire, to a contagious ripple through a crowded room, to a small blue bubble on a phone screen that says nothing more than, haha. The mechanism hasn't moved an inch in millions of years. Only the stage has changed. So the next time you laugh at something that wasn't even funny, you'll know exactly what actually happened. It wasn't comedy, it was your ancestors reaching all the way across evolutionary time, using the oldest trick they ever built, just to make sure you still knew how to feel safe with the people standing next to you.